All right, so you sent us this YouTube video. The title is like, New York is real, playoff team. Canty reacts, Giant signs Jameis Winston to a 2-year, $8 round contract. And it got us thinking, I mean, what does this move, bringing Jameis Winston on a 2-year, $8 million deal, what does it really say about how the Giants are approaching the quarterback situation, especially with that number 3 pick in the draft looming? Are they suddenly thinking playoffs? Is Winston maybe their guy? What's going on here?
Yeah, no, that $8 million over 2 years for Winston, it definitely makes you wonder, right? And you hit it on the head. I mean, that YouTube video you sent, it kind of lays out the big questions. Like, first off, does signing Winston instantly make the Giants contenders? Second, can Winston actually be a reliable starter in this league if they need him to be? And then, of course, maybe the most important part, what does all this mean for their draft strategy? I mean, they're sitting there with the 3rd overall pick. Everyone's talking about quarterbacks. It's fascinating.
Right. So let's just start with those gut reactions, those first impressions of the Winston signing. That video we watched, it picked up on this vibe that, yeah, Winston in New York, that's going to be entertaining, no doubt good for the press conferences and all that. But there's still this huge question mark about how he'll actually perform on the field. Like, there's this sense that even if he ends up starting, at least the Giants won't be a total joke.
It's interesting, right? You get that two-sided reaction. On one hand, it's like, oh, Jameis Winston, the personality, the big plays, the potential for chaos. But then there's that reality check, his actual track record. And when avoiding being a joke is the standard, I mean, maybe that just shows how low the bar is for the Giants' quarterback situation right now. It's more about perception than guaranteed wins,
Yeah, it is. And this brings us to Winston's actual ability. The guy in the video seemed genuinely confused by all the negativity around Winston. He brought up guys like Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, even Geno Smith, quarterbacks who've been through the ringer, criticism, changing teams. But some of them ended up finding success later on. What do you think about that comparison?
I think it's a really good point. The path for a quarterback in the NFL, it's not always a straight line. Players develop, they find the right coach, maybe a new team is all it takes. That video mentioned Winston's record with the Saints. He went 5-2 in those 7 starts back in 2021. And the point is, that's proof he can be a competent backup quarterback. And look, in the NFL, having a backup who can step in and actually win games, that's a big deal. Sure, he was the number 1 overall pick. Maybe he didn't live up to that hype. But that doesn't mean he can't play at this level.
For sure. The video host was basically saying, look, just because he was the number 1 pick and didn't become a superstar doesn't mean he suddenly can't play quarterback. Maybe we need to reevaluate what we expect from him at this point.
Exactly. People throw around the word bust way too easily. Plenty of guys who don't become all-pros can still be valuable. That 2021 record shows he's not actively hurting the team. So if Winston can be a solid backup, the big question is, does that change how the Giants approach the draft? Does it make them less desperate to grab a quarterback at number 3? Or maybe it frees them up to go for someone with more potential who needs time to develop.
That is the big question. And the video definitely seems to think that even with Winston, the Giants are still in the quarterback business come draft night.
Yeah.
So all's on that number 3 pick unless they do something crazy and trade up.
Absolutely. I mean, having Winston doesn't rule out drafting a quarterback high. That video made a really interesting comparison talking about Geno Smith, how he went from being a laughingstock to actually finding success later on. So maybe Winston could surprise people, right? But the thing is, with the number 3 pick, you're usually looking for that franchise guy, someone to build around, not someone hoping for a late career comeback.
It's really interesting what the video pointed out about how Winston has gotten the biggest pass out of all the number 1 picks in terms of criticism. Like, compare him to Marcus Mariota night and day. The video even showed some stuff with fans, positive interactions, Winston at the Super Bowl, all smiles. Maybe it has more to do with his personality, his media presence, than just what he does on the field. What do you think?
That's a great point. In the NFL, how a player interacts with the media, how the fans perceive him, that can create a whole narrative, almost separate from their actual performance. Winston's always had that charisma, and maybe that shields him from some of the negativity other quarterbacks with similar stats might face. It's a good reminder that how we see a player is influenced by a lot of things, not just wins and losses.
Yeah. So this all plays into the idea from the video that Winston is basically a bridge to the future for the Giants. And that aligns with what John Mara's been saying, right? Finding a long-term solution at quarterback.
Yeah.
So when we talk about a bridge quarterback, What does that actually mean in the NFL?
Basically, it's a veteran who can hold down the fort while the team either develops a young quarterback they already have or tries to find that long-term guy, usually through the draft. They're usually good enough to start to win games, but they're not the answer for the next 5 or 10 years. And Winston's 2-year deal, it definitely fits that bridge profile.
Right. And the video also talked about how Winston could mentor a rookie quarterback if the Giants draft one. Think about a young guy coming into the New York media circus, having a former #1 overall pick right there in the quarterback room with him, someone who's been through it all. That could be huge, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the mental side of being a rookie quarterback in the NFL, especially in a place like New York, it's intense. Having a veteran like Winston who knows the pressure, the ups and downs, that could be incredibly valuable.
Now, this is where the video gets really interesting. It starts to wonder if the Giants should even be drafting a quarterback in #3 anymore. The argument is maybe the team's not in the right place for a young quarterback to succeed, especially with potential changes in coaching and management. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that's a really important point that often gets overlooked. A young quarterback needs stability to develop. If the coaching staff is constantly changing different offensive systems every year, that can really hurt a rookie's progress. The video even brought up the possibility of a new coaching staff coming in after the draft and wanting their own guy. That's definitely a legitimate concern. We've seen it happen before, talented quarterbacks struggling because they have to keep adjusting to new systems.
Yeah. The guy in the video even said he likes some of the quarterbacks in this draft, but maybe this isn't the right time for the Giants to take one. It's like drafting for need isn't always the same as drafting for long-term success, especially when it comes to quarterbacks.
Exactly. You got to make sure your quarterback strategy aligns with the overall state of the team. Drafting a quarterback high is a huge commitment, and you want to make sure they're walking into a good situation, a place where they can actually grow and succeed. Patience is key. You need a solid plan.
And then the video throws out this crazy idea. Could the fact that the Giants signed Winston and brought back Tommy DeVito actually be a sign that they're going to draft a quarterback? Like, the logic is, if they weren't thinking about a quarterback in the draft, wouldn't they have gone after a bigger-name veteran starter instead of two guys who are basically backups?
That's some next-level thinking there. It's true. Having those two backups does give them flexibility without being tied to a big contract for a veteran starter. It could definitely be a way of keeping their options open for the draft so they can take a young quarterback and let him develop behind Winston and DeVito.
So let's talk about those draft scenarios. The video mentions the Giants maybe trading up to #1 to get a specific quarterback, even throwing out Cam Ward as a possibility. How realistic do you think that is?
Well, trading up to the top spot, that's always a gamble. You need a ton of draft capital, maybe even players. Like the video said, it all depends on the team with the #1 pick and whether they're willing to move down. It's hard to say how likely it is without knowing exactly how each team evaluates the quarterbacks, but if a team really loves a certain guy, they'll definitely explore all their options.
What about other veterans? The video mentions Russell Wilson. Does signing Winston mean Wilson's off the table? It seems kind of redundant to have both of them, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't think they'd have two veterans on similar contracts, especially if they're also drafting a rookie. But the video did say that maybe Wilson could still be an option, maybe if they miss out on their top quarterback targets in the draft or if they just want to create more competition. It wouldn't be the usual way to do things, but I guess you can't rule it out completely.
And it also seemed kind of dismissive about them bringing back Tommy DeVito. Like, maybe it's more about keeping the fans happy than actually being serious about him as a quarterback. I don't really get the sense that Giants fans are clamoring for Tommy DeVito, you know?
It just goes to show that sometimes you have to balance what the fans want with what makes sense from a football perspective. Sure, a local guy could be a good story, but in the end, it's got to be about performance and potential.
And then the video dropped, this little nugget. Apparently, the Giants' plan all along was to have two veterans and draft a quarterback. So signing Winston wasn't a change in strategy, it was always part of the plan. Does that change how we look at this?
It does, right? I mean, if they always wanted that veteran duo, then Winston is just one half of the equation. It's not like they saw him as the answer, more like a piece of the puzzle, someone to pair with either another veteran or, most likely, a rookie they draft.
The video even threw out a hypothetical. What if the Titans take Cam Ward at #1, and then the Browns take Shedder Sanders at #2? Would Jackson Dart be the guy for the Giants at #3 then? It just shows how unpredictable the draft can be.
Absolutely. I mean, your whole draft board can change depending on what the teams ahead of you do. If the Giants were set on Ward or Sanders, they'd have to adjust on the fly, see who's the next best quarterback on their list. And yeah, maybe that's Jackson Dart. It just shows how important it is to be prepared for anything on draft night.
And finally, the video talked about what it called a worst-case scenario. The Giants ending up with Winston, a drafted rookie, and Russell Wilson. They seem to think that would be a huge waste of resources.
Yeah, having three quarterbacks like that, it could get messy. It wouldn't be good for the rookie's development, not enough practice reps, and who knows who'd actually start. Plus, think about the salary cap hit. It just doesn't seem like a smart way to build a team. Usually it's better to have a clear plan, someone who's the starter now and someone who's the future.
Okay, so let's wrap it all up. From this video, it sounds like Winston's probably a decent backup, maybe even better than people think, but he's definitely not the long-term answer. And the weird thing is, him signing with the Giants, along with DeVito coming back, might actually be the biggest sign yet that they're going all in on a quarterback in the draft, even with all the uncertainty about the coaching staff and everything.
That's a good summary. Winston gives them a safety net, some options heading into the draft, but they still need a franchise quarterback. That hasn't changed. The big question is, how and when do they go after that guy, especially with the possibility of more coaching changes down the road?
So for everyone listening, here's something to think about. Based on all this, what do you think is the biggest risk the Giants are taking right now with their quarterback situation? Are they putting too many eggs in one basket with all these quarterbacks? Are they setting up a rookie to fail if the coaching staff keeps changing? Or are they so focused on getting a quarterback at number 3 that they might miss out on filling other needs on the team? That's something to chew on. All right, that's it for this deep dive. Catch you next time.